Let's bring in Joel Pollak, senior editor-at-large at Breitbart News, born in South Africa, studied at the University of Cape Town. Joel, welcome to you. I'm curious to get your take on what we just watched play out at the White House.
The South African delegation came prepared to lecture President Trump on why he was wrong about the discrimination and threats against white farmers and white South Africans generally. The president of South Africa, addressing Trump's claim of genocide, pointed out that there were 3 white South Africans in the room with him, including a member of his own government. Trump then put on the video that you just saw an excerpt of, and it is a video of a prominent South African leader, Julius Malema, who leads one of the major opposition parties, calling for the murder of farmers, chanting, "Kill the farmer, shoot to kill," being joined in that chant by stadiums full of supporters. And South Africa actually has laws against hate speech. Even in this country, where we don't have hate speech laws, that kind of speech would be considered incitement. But as Trump pointed out, nothing was being done about that. And South Africa has laws, including one recently signed by Cyril Ramaphosa himself, that allow the taking of property without compensation. There are also racially discriminatory laws that affect white South Africans and other minority groups within South Africa. So Trump showed the South African president to his face the evidence that the South African president was trying to deny with this nakedly racial appeal, and it was very effective.
Yeah. You know, at one part, so after this very dramatic video plays, and then, you know, they go back and forth over the elements of it, and you see the pushback from the South African president about what is that? You know, I'm not aware of this area with these white crosses, but as soon as this very dramatic video ended, Peter Alexander from NBC piped in, "Tell me about the Qatari jet. Are you going to accept it?" Which did happen today. But I'm curious what you thought, because you have so much background and commitment to South Africa, having grown up there. Were you a bit stunned that the press in the Oval Office just sort of wanted to fly right by this issue?
Well, there's that old saying, read the room. Everybody in the room, whether South African journalists or American journalists, everybody was hanging on every word coming from either of the 2 leaders, because that confrontation was the most important thing to happen to South Africa since apartheid ended 31 years ago. Trump was forcing a conversation about the progress South Africa has made or hasn't made. He was forcing a conversation about where U.S.-South Africa relations are. And in waltzes this other journalist with his question about a Qatari plane. He had some kind of assignment from his editor, and he was determined to try to get Trump's reaction. And he didn't care about the context. And everybody in the room, one senses, was irritated with him, not just Trump, the other journalists, the South African journalists. So Trump sent him back to the kids' table and let the adults continue talking.
I just want to play this quickly. This is Retief Goosen, who is one of the people who was brought in with the South African president. He's a golfer, and he was talking about his family's own experience. And he was brought with the South African president, but he, you know, really made a point that I think was contrary in many ways to what the South African president was trying to promote here. Watch this.
They live behind electric fences, you know, try and be at night safe. But it is constant whenever you leave that something could happen. And
there's nowhere to live.
You know, both of them has been attacked in their houses. My mom's been attacked in her house when she was 80. So it is difficult.
So let me ask you this. You know, I watched the lower thirds of the other networks, and they said, you know, Trump pushes false claims of genocide in South Africa. What is your take on this? You know, how much of this is actually happening? How many people are being killed in these situations? What's the reality from your reporting?
South Africa has extremely high levels of violent crime that are growing worse. And that crime affects both black and white South Africans, as Johan Rupert, one of the South African businessmen in the room, pointed out. But there is also the separate issue of the targeting of white South Africans, especially Afrikaners, especially farmers. And many South Africans believe that it is a deliberate act to target those farmers, and they hear the rhetoric of Julius Malema, who Trump put on that video. By the way, in reaction to the meeting, Julius Malema posted statements in which he stood by his positions, and his party reiterated the chant, "Kill the farmer." You have a situation that will lend itself to genocide because this kind of incendiary rhetoric is being used to justify those farm killings, and that's what Trump is pointing to.
I just want to very quickly play this soundbite from Nelson Mandela on the day that he was inaugurated, freed from prison and inaugurated. And he later got heat from certain groups in South Africa for being too open to having a partnership with all of the different communities of the country. Here's what he said on that day.
We enter into a covenant that we shall build a society in which all South Africans, both black and white, will be able to walk tall without any fear in their hearts, assured of their inalienable right to human dignity, a rainbow nation at peace with itself and the world.
Thoughts on that, given where we are today?
That is the South Africa with which the United States has a good relationship, not the South Africa of corruption, crime, and racial incendiary rhetoric that pushes an agenda of radical redistribution. The woke ideas of racial redistribution are destroying the South African economy, just like they threaten to destroy our institutions over here. And you heard the pleas from those in the Oval Office, from Ernie Els, from others in the room. Please, we need American help to get the reforms through that are necessary for South Africa, not just to have good relations with the United States, but to save itself from economic collapse. And even though this was criticism from Trump against South Africa, it was the best thing to happen to South Africa since the end of apartheid.
Fascinating. He pushed the issue right into the Oval Office and really forced everybody to pay attention today, which is a very interesting move on his part. Thank you so much, Joel Pollak. Good to have you here today.